Welcome to Playing with Fire, the podcast for people who are ready to custom build their love.
We're talking about non-monogamy, however you design it, as an individuation opportunity.
Want to leave the default and make your life spectacularly you? You're in the right place. Hey, Ken, let's talk about getting polybombed.
Okay. And let's start off with, what is it?
Yeah, I had to actually catch you up on this one because you don't spend as much time on social media as I do. So I don't think that you see this word tossed around as much.
I wasn't familiar with it when you brought it to me.
But I think it's an important
guess. I was wrong. So what is it?
Okay, polybombed, the way I am hearing it used is that in the context of a monogamous relationship, one partner states that they're poly and they're polyamorous, and henceforth something has to change. And I mean, I don't want to say it's not a thing, because certainly, I mean, I did that. I was in a monogamous relationship and I announced my newfound polyamory. So I don't want to act like that's not a real thing. It definitely is. And it shocked the hell out of my partner at the time.
So I guess is that a piece of it then? Is the shock of it?
I think that's
I
think that's why the use of the word bombed.
Yeah.
Right. That makes sense. But there was your experience. There's an overuse of this, or there's an over assumption of this concept too. And I think it's important to talk about the use of the word polybombed. It makes it sound like there is something wrong with sharing with your partner this newfound knowledge.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is so you were having this internal experience of the world, and you wanted to share it with your partner.
Right. And my story is well documented on this podcast and hundreds of others. So y'all know that I will tell you, don't hop into the shower with your partner one night and say, I'm in love with someone else out of the blue.
Yeah.
However, it's not actually, it's more complicated than that. My story is more complicated than that. I think most people's experience of coming to the awareness that they could potentially have feelings for more than one person at a time, I think it's always more complex than we tend to give it creed or credence for. I'm not sure I'm using that word right.
I think we all get what you mean.
Okay. Okay. So I think that it's important to get clear on other ways that we might think about this information being shared, right? If I'm
because there you are having the feelings, having the experience, and because you're in a relationship with someone that you want to share your life experience with, this is a topic that is now a not just reasonable but desirable topic of conversation. So how do you get there?
Right. So what I find comes up for people that I'm working with now is a lot of people start to feel like there's no good time. It's never okay. So I'm in a monogamous relationship, and maybe you're even feeling this way yourself. Maybe you feel like, yep, I was polybombed. I was in a monogamous marriage. I was in a monogamous long-term relationship. That is what I signed up for. That's what I signed on for. And so the shock of having someone change the rules on you, that's how I usually hear it talked about. Like, they changed the rules. And the shock of that is real. I want to totally honor that. And people change and grow. And something that comes up a lot of times is someone saying, I'll hear, well, that's not fair because you needed to disclose this to me before we were together, before we committed. But not everybody knows.
It might not be available information before then.
Right. And the inspiration, the moment when you come to realize that you have this capacity to potentially be multiple in your loves or your sexual attractions or whatever, the moment when that enters your awareness, for most people, it's an internal shock. If they're coming out of a monogamous reality, there's an internal shock that happens. I definitely experienced that way. I was shocked when it happened the first time. And I think I was maybe 15 the first time I realized, oh, when I have feelings for one person, my feelings for another person don't go away. No, I must have been younger than that. I was in 8th grade. So I'd be like 12 and a half. So, and it still was shocking. I thought something was broken and wrong with me.
And so in the context of a relationship with someone else, that's so now I'm reminded of dysregulation. So you have this experience that is shocking to you.
Right.
Get a little dysregulated. Where do you go? You go to the person that you go to with you that thank you that you co-regulate with. But now they have to figure out how to regulate with this new information, and that can go a bunch of different ways.
And realistically, this may feel like it is game-changing information on both sides of a monogamous equation, right? Like receiving this information doesn't necessarily mean that your relationship structure is changing. So I think, like, if I were to rewind to the beginning of this podcast, I would say, well, what exactly were you told? Like, if the question is, hey, I got polybombed, what do I do now? Well, first off, what exactly did you
That's
learn?
a really good question, right?
Because, in some cases it's, hey, I have these feelings, these questions. I'm really curious. I don't understand what's happening. In some cases it's, I've developed feelings for someone else and I don't know what to do about it. In some cases, it legitimately is I am polyamorous and now you have to be too. That's
a strong statement right there.
Right. To say, like, you have to do this too. And yet, somewhere in all of that lies this very nuanced gray area where I've discovered that I am polyamorous. Would you, and I'm I'm identifying either my identity, my orientation, my desire to live that life. Would you come on an adventure with me? Would you come on this exploration to find out whether it's possible for us to do that? And I don't want to act like it's not a big ask. I think it is a big ask. And we make big asks of each other.
We do.
I had so many times I can think of making these big decisions like having children or deciding to move back from the East Coast, Massachusetts area, move back into the middle of nowhere, Western Massachusetts, or going to grad school several times.
Well, you're right that it is very important if somebody comes and says, I just got polybombed. What exactly was said? What was the information passed on? Because if you came to me, if we were in a monogamous relationship and you came to me and you said, I'm in love with somebody, that may just be pure information. Like, I don't have to respond to that in any way at all, other than, wow, that sounds very complicated.
Right.
What now?
That's actually my story. And I've told this story on stage and stuff. And like the funny version of the story is that, I jump in the shower and in my naivete, I'm like, guess what? I'm totally head over heels for Ken, for you. I cannot believe we are still together, by the way. That's a ridiculous reality.
It was statistically unlikely.
Yeah, I don't even know. You want to
That's
do
what
the math?
everybody told me anyway.
It does not seem. Yeah. Okay. But I didn't say anything about what needed to happen next. I was just like, whoa. I did not know I could possibly have feelings like this for him because he's so annoying.
So annoying.
And so not my type.
And have
and
been like
so
for
tall
decades.
and like, I was really genuinely like.
You were looking for sympathy. That's what you were looking for. Feel bad for me.
I was looking for him to be consternated. I thought my husband at the time would be just as befuddled as I was.
Where did that come
like,
from?
Really? Him?
Bleeker?
But you don't like him.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be funny. And the thing is, there were parts of him who appeared to see how it was funny and it was unusual, and also how it was very, very very typical for me to have crushes on people. I got crushes on people all the time. Um, and then over the ensuing days and weeks, it was the trying to figure out what exactly this means for us that was really about whether we were going to use this as relational growth material or whether it was going to break us.
So
So
yeah, there's a really important point, which brings you back to the purpose of your relationship.
yeah,
Um,
do you know what your relationship is for?
what is it really? Maybe
Because I
relational growth wasn't on the agenda.
Yeah, so my first marriage was not, its purpose was not relational growth. Its purpose was to try to keep each of us safe-ish and to have children. Like that's what we were doing together. Um and to build some businesses. We were doing that too. And those were our purposes. We were not invested in each other's psychological growth. We were very much not invested in spiritual growth together. Um so yeah, I totally get why for him it was an experience of like, "What the fuck? That's not what we said we were gonna do." And my experience was, "Oh, well, now I don't know exactly what I want, but I know that the life we're living, like, it doesn't include all the things I want it to include." And that wasn't actually about just you. That was, "Oh, I there's this whole other language about how relationships can work, and there's there are people out there talking about this, and there are conversations to be had." And I was entranced by the idea that there could be sexual multiplicity too. I don't want to
Okay.
overlook that. I absolutely was. So there were all these more nuanced things that were part of the information that he received that, wow, if you hear polyamory or you hear non-monogamy and you see red and it just like feels like a total freak out, um you're probably not going to hear all the nuance, all the potentials. You probably feel really dysregulated. Um, and that's really, really hard. But there's an opportunity there too. There's a huge opportunity to
Yeah.
know who each other
Mhm.
actually are. Because when I think about the other option, what might have happened. So if I had pretended, if I had noticed that I had these very deeply polyamorous inclinations and I had decided that that was not something I should share, then my husband was going to have the rest of his relationship with me not knowing who I was.
And that was something like independent of what he wanted out of your relationship. My understanding is that's not something you wanted.
I didn't it started to feel like I wasn't gonna be in a relationship. I was willing to, negotiate and talk about what behaviors we participated in, because that's a different question,
Yeah, right.
that
It
is a
very much
different
is.
question, but the idea of like, well, what if I do behave with this idea of multiplicity in mind? What could happen? What might our life look like? Um, I'm glad that I'm glad that I landed where I landed now, but I had no idea that what would really hurt the most was that it turned out he didn't want to know me if I didn't fit his monogamous standard.
So
That was heartbreaking. And I know I broke his heart too. I don't mean to make this one-sided. Um, I broke his heart and in one way, and he broke mine in another because I still feel to this day like, oh, you didn't want to know me once that was one of my truths, once that was real for me. And it was his right to know that about himself and then to excuse himself from the relationship was totally his right. And I lost a really good friend through that. And he wasn't the only friend I lost because not
that's
everybody
right.
wants to know this
Yeah.
is a reality.
This is a
Um,
way things can go. And what so we're talking about the concept of polybombing. And one of the one of the topics we could be talking about is, so how could you like present information in a way that isn't a shock, that isn't a bomb?
Right.
And the thing is, it might not be possible with a particular person. It might be, well, you were just said, if you see red when you hear poly, then there might be no way to have a gentle discussion that leads, with more ease toward, okay, how do we work together with this in this relationship?
But there are best
But there are
practices.
best practices.
And
Yeah.
and there are some really, like, it was the worst part about that story that I told, hopping into the shower, wasn't that I told him when we'd hopped into the shower. It's that it was 2 o'clock in the morning.
That
And
is
I was still
a
nursing a child. Like, we had little
rough
kids, right?
time of day and
So
tired.
we were tired, and we were going to be more tired by whatever unfolded after that.
Yeah.
That was poor planning. I hear a lot of people who share their polyamorous inclinations on long car rides when their partner feels trapped, like they
Oh,
can't get out of the conversation
that,
because now
yeah.
they're
Those
quite
are
literally trapped.
dysregulating experiences.
Yeah. Another time is right before, yeah, like right before we need to go to bed and I have a big meeting in the morning, like not taking the context into account.
Right.
Um, and I think the last one, and this actually might ring more true for you in a previous marriage, is that if you have made a function of your marriage be we keep things level and steady.
Oh,
It,
yeah.
like, if everything has to be, and we are explicitly committed to maintaining the status quo, then there isn't going to be a lot you can do. When you want to introduce a new aspect of yourself, it will probably be a shock and dysregulating. So one of the things we can do is foster a sense of being open to our partners changing. And
Okay.
that's a big picture ask. Like, I can't do that overnight.
Do you have some suggestions on how one might foster being open to our partners changing?
Well, I mean, there are a million different ways, but one of the first ones is to do a reality check. Like, really do a reality check on you, yourself, and say 3 or 4 people you know. How many career shifts have they gone through? How many spiritual shifts? How many educational shifts or personal growth changes have you noticed? How many times have they changed what type of avocation they have? Like, humans tend to change. We're incredibly adaptable. So a reality check on, yep, humans change. That's real. I need the reality check a lot of times. I need to remind myself that it's completely reasonable and normal for people to change and for them to change their mind. Just because they
Yes.
said they were this way doesn't mean they won't have new information about themselves over time. That's just the nature of being human. And that's a dysregulating fact.
Yeah, I have
It's
a
kind of upsetting.
a theory about humans that one of the reasons we resist change so much is how incredibly good we are at it. If we didn't have like a break on it, the changes would be constant and everywhere, and there would be almost no stability because we learn so fast. We really do.
We're incredibly adaptive.
We're incredibly adaptable. Us and the orcas.
Yeah. So yay us. And yeah, so then there's this internal resistance to the idea of
Yeah.
change, especially if it comes from a partner rather
Yeah.
than
The
self-generated.
external
Right?
change
Like,
can cause more trouble than internal change.
and another thing that comes up is like, well, how do you define relationship success?
Yeah.
Because if you define relationship success as how long did we last, then like change of any kind, your partner changing, them learning something about their sexuality or their relationship styles, their love style, or learning something about how they want to spend their time in the world. If all of a sudden they want to be spending their time differently, if that doesn't line up for you, then one option is that your relationship doesn't continue, and that's okay. But we have placed such a premium, such a huge premium on the idea that longevity is the hallmark, the actual,
Right.
that is the marker of a successful relationship. But who said?
And
Like,
yeah,
who said? I I see a lot of people real miserable at 50th anniversaries.
Hmm.
That is not my definition of success.
So that brings up a sort of philosophical question of, okay, so the goal of this relationship is longevity. Okay, at what point during this longevity did this relationship stop being one thing, start being something else? Is it long, or did it actually just morph into something completely different? Like, where are the beginning and ends of these relationships? Because, like you said, I've seen people miserable at 50th wedding anniversaries. And I've also seen what those and heard stories of what they were like 30, 40 years ago. It wasn't like that. That doesn't sound like the same relationship to me.
Right? So it brings up the concept of, are we actually in one relationship
Yeah.
for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, or are we regenerating new relationships with
Yep.
the person we're standing next to? And in the monogamous context, if longevity feels good to you, um, okay, that's fine. But it is not the only way you could define the success of a relationship.
Right.
One of the ways that I define success in relationship is the ability to transition between relational states with grace.
And here, and
I
which is, I think, exactly what we're talking about here with the polybombing. Can we get through this new information with grace and
and making space for exploration.
mutuality too?
Yeah.
Like, okay, let's figure out together what's going to happen. We were committed to being in this relationship. You just found this new information. Well, okay, let's act in good faith. Maybe I can assume goodwill from your point of view. There's ways that I can
Yeah.
engage in that makes it graceful.
And one of the things that we can talk about right off the bat is learning new information about myself does not mean that I absolutely need to take action on this information. Figuring out that I'm polyamorous does not mean I need to open a Tinder profile. It just doesn't it doesn't mean that. Your experience of growing through changing and shifting and becoming aware of your relational desires, your needs, your wants, all of that, that is largely an internal process that then you will get to enact in the world in different ways, but it doesn't have to, like, your dating isn't going to be what defines you as polyamorous. And so if when you're sharing this information, you start talking about actions first, like that's the very first thing, then you are probably going to run right up against your partner feeling like shit. And we have another episode titled "Why Am I Not Enough?" that I think nests right in with
Yeah.
this one,
Yeah, you're right.
because that is the question that haunts people who were shocked with the information of, whoa, what? Wait, but I thought I was your everything. And now you're saying that I'm not? Does that mean I'm not enough? Right? So one of the things we can do is slow down the, like, what needs to happen next, because also if you've just figured out that you have the capacity to love multiply, well, you're gonna have some skill building to do.
Yeah, you got a
Like,
lot
there's
of
stuff to
adjusting
do.
and learning to do.
Right,
Mhm.
because having multiple simultaneous relationships takes skills. And that's a hill I'm willing to die on. It takes skills. It takes skills to have one good, healthy, loving, connective relationship, and most of us got no actual teaching on this, and most of us didn't even have a good role model because a lot of us had crappy role models for relationships. So it's reasonable to allow yourself time to build skills, and you might not even know which skills you need to build. Like, most people just think like, "Oh, I just need better communication." That is vague as hell. That is not specific enough.
That is not communication isn't a skill.
Yeah, it's
It's
much more complex
much
than
more.
that. So, okay, so let's say you best practices. If you acknowledge that relationships can be built to be flexible and resilient to change because humans change, if you foster that as a baseline in your relationship, even if you're monogamous, if you just can foster that reality, then the ground will be more amenable to this sort of information.
Right.
Um, if you if you can set yourself up for success by sharing the information as you get it. So quite honestly, I did share my information, my internal information. I shared it as I came to it. My first husband like knew every crush I'd ever had. He'd known that I had fallen in love over and over and over again. I didn't have the words polyamorous. I barely even knew the concept of swinging. Like I knew it was a thing that people did like in the 70s, but I didn't know it was a real thing until I found out my whole friend group was doing it and just didn't tell me.
Yeah.
And I feel a little salty about that, gotta
Uh,
tell you. Like what's the deal there? If
Hey.
you were listening, feel free to tell me why I wasn't invited to those parties. I would love that information right now. Um funny little drop into this
That's
episode.
true. Yeah.
But I didn't know. And so when I had this moment where I was like, "Oh, I have feelings for another person." I told my partner about this crush. And what happened was simultaneously to that, I was introduced to the concept of polyamory by another friend who was exploring in polyamorous land herself. Like that's what she was doing. And I was I was like, I don't know what that is. It sounds really hard and complicated. I don't get it. How does that work? But as she introduced the language and then her husband introduced some more language, I was like, okay. And then I talked to you and you were like, oh yeah, we've been open. You didn't have
Didn't
any
have the words,
language.
didn't have, yeah, any useful
But it turned out
background in the
there were
concepts.
right, but there were
Just
lots
this
of people who
practical living
had
of, yeah, oh yeah, that's a thing.
right,
Yep.
lots of people who had the knowledge, the self-awareness that loving multiply was not unusual. And so as I gained this information, I did share it with my partner. So he was able to start taking that information in. Um, Something that I see a lot of people do that I strongly recommend against is this idea that okay, so I understand I am polyamorous now, and so I'm going to get all the education I can. I'm going to self-educate on this. I'm going to know everything, and then I'll bring it to my partner.
Okay.
Don't do that.
So that's one of the ways that you can
I
really
don't recommend it.
increase the shock of it,
Right.
right? You
Well,
come
shock
in and
and
here's the
difference. Like this that like you are going to be at such a different place from your
right.
partner. So like it's not an all or nothing. I'm not saying you shouldn't go pick up a book. Like, go pick up a book. Obviously, you're listening to this podcast. So, um, educate yourself, yes. But if you wait months, years, I've seen multiple people who've waited decades, decades before bringing this information up. What happens is you wind up with so much information. You're so far down the road, and then your partner's like, what? What? And you have all this information. And now you've put yourself in the place of being like the teacher or the one who knows. And also your partner now feels left behind. Um, you're going to have to allow a lot of time for them to catch up with their education, even if they are on board. Well, how long did it take you to gather all the information you have? How long did it take you to adjust to the idea? And have you adjusted to the idea that just because this is true for you doesn't mean that it might not be true for doesn't mean that it will be true for your partner. And if you have discovered your polyamory internally, are you prepared to be in a non-monogamous relationship? Are you prepared to experience your partner being non-monogamous with you? Because a lot of us in those early
Oh,
days, we only feel
the,
it from the
the
inside.
imagination is sort of this one way. I
Yeah,
will
like
be polyamorous
I
and
feel polyamorous and I will
will
go
get my partner on board and forget to
and
connect the last step of now your partner may be polyamorous too, which means
usually, yeah,
I mean, that's
most people are not going for the monogamous, polyamorous, cross marriage situation. I'm not saying you can't do it. You absolutely can.
but you got a
Um,
pretty good chance of discovering that you're going to be in a relationship with a polyamorous
and you
person
can't
if they've
demand it.
accepted yours, and you
I
can't.
think it is flat out unethical to say I am polyamorous, but I need you to be monogamous. I am just no. I got another hill I will die on. I have no problem on this one. No, nope, we don't get to do that. I find it incredibly controlling and eh, and just so hypocritical. So hypocritical. If I mean, you're going to need to do your work and I get it. And it doesn't mean that just because you've done the work to get yourself to a spot where you feel good about your polyamory that you'll be totally yay and full of compersion for your partner, but you don't get to demand monogamy from them.
Agreed.
So there are, like we said,
Yeah,
some
what
best
else? What
practices.
else can we do?
So first off, allow time for education and adaptation. And this is tricky because remember, your partner isn't necessarily enthused about this, right? And so they may not want to. But if you were the person who feels like you were, shocked with the ice bucket of polyamory information, I would encourage you to lean into the education piece. Leaning into the education doesn't mean that you are committed to taking action, to starting to date, to officially opening your relationship. But leaning into the information could be you showing up in good faith to, hey, my partner says that they've changed, that something's different for them. I would say the same thing if my partner came out as queer or trans. If they come to me with some new information, oh heck, I mean, I came to you and wanted to go from being a CrossFit gym owner to a psychologist.
There are so many changes that can happen along the way, and
I mean, and you did not like psychology then at all. I remember that decision making. You were like way against it. And
that's true.
you had
That's
to
true.
do
I
some
had to, I
self-educating
had
to
to
be like,
educate. I
how am I
had
going to
to
be on board?
reorient to, okay, so what is it? And one of the things that helped me was I'm like, oh, say, what is it you see in this? What
Yeah.
is it that lights you up about psychology? It's a good metaphor. It's a good analogy because yeah, so I feel a little threatened by you reaching towards something that I have avoided and to some extent dismissed and vilified throughout my life. But you're interested in it. So, one of the things that I got to do was to learn about it enough so that a bunch of the objections I had turned out were not applicable at all. They just weren't. And
Right.
so, if your partner comes to you with this idea of polyamory and you start learning about it, you may find that some of those things that scare you or activate you just aren't true. That's not what this is about.
Right. Because your
So,
partner's version of polyamory, their imagination of it is probably
right,
not one dimensional,
right.
right? Like,
There's so much to learn.
and there's so
So,
many ways to
time
do
for that
this.
learning is key.
Yeah. So time. Um, and then, I don't think we should forget to mention that a lot of times the inspiration for this is that there has been um other stuff going on in the relationship. It's ridiculous to think that there haven't been many, many, many people who walk into my office building their polyamory on a foundation that has experienced a lot of rupture, maybe infidelity, lots of dysregulated or just flat out abusive dynamics between them. And that stuff still has to get addressed. Polyamory doesn't fix any of it, literally nothing.
Nothing, none of it. Yeah.
It also doesn't mean that you can't move forward, but I would caution you to pace yourself more strategically, because so when I'm sharing my own story, I think if I were to estimate with all of my knowledge from here, my clinical knowledge, my lived experience, I would say it would have taken us probably 4 or 5 years to repair all the damage. We had an incredibly
Oh,
dysfunctional
yeah.
marriage. And so we were going to have to dig in and do a lot of repair to get to a spot where we were going to be like actively compulsive for each other and things. It wasn't going to happen overnight. I've seen other people do it in between 9 months and a year. Yeah, but I rarely see it happen overnight. It's not just a shift that you make all at once. Instead, you have to choose to actively engage in repair processes and to deal with the fact that some mismatches, some desire mismatches, some like rupture that has then created distance between you will have to be addressed. And we can't just sweep that under the rug and say like, well, more partners will fix that. No, my connection with
Yeah,
you is
that's
my
not,
connection with you.
yep, that's not how that's going to work. And on the other side, so there you are, you've got a collection of things that have built up over time, been a relationship for a while. There's stuff to work out.
Mhm.
Okay. And if you're both intentionally moving toward polyamorous relating style, don't rely on just monogamous advice
Ooh,
in your dealing with those ruptures. Don't just use monogamous tactics in your repair work,
right.
because that's not where you're headed.
Right. I'm always very, very suspicious when people rely, for instance, only on Gottman techniques. Gottman's research is relatively solid. I know a lot of people swear up one side and down the other. We could get into a much more nuanced debate about that because the research may have been massively overinterpreted. But I think that the techniques are really solid for a monogamous
And
relationship.
that's
And the Gottmans are very clear about that. I think a lot of them can transfer to non monogamy, but if the person implementing them, so if let's say you have a therapist or a coach who's implementing techniques and they're implementing techniques that were designed for monogamous relationship, and they themselves have no information beyond just like I'm poly friendly, if they don't know what it feels like, if they haven't trained themselves to be really sensitive to the issues of multiple relationships, then you're going to get monogamous solutions to fix your non-monogamous life design, and that won't necessarily help. So it's a and the same goes for turning who we turn to, like who we turn to in our communities.
that's where I was going to go next. Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
So the more people you can find to connect with who are in the same boat, who are working toward the same end. I mean, it's not the exact same end, because every set of people, two,
Intentional
three, four, whatever.
relationship design.
Yeah, intentional relationship design. And so if you surround yourself with people looking at things from that point of view versus um, people with no interest in looking beyond monogamy, start getting more voices of people reaching past monogamy. That's
So,
going to help you.
yeah. So if you feel like you were like, if you were caught off guard by this polyamorous information, but if everyone you turn to for your next steps wants to then blame and shame
Oh,
and guilt and all like and say everything will go bad now, well, it's going to feel like everything will go bad now.
right.
That's not actually the only way things can go. It is one of the great joys of my life to watch people blossom and grow and change and make space for each other in ways they never imagined possible.
Mhm.
And the easiest way to do that is to also include some community that is also going through. They're learning really world-class communication. They're learning how to show up and be present for really complex realities, like being present, like
Yeah.
wow, I didn't even know the world could be that way. um yeah, I mean, that's why the year of opening exists, is because when you get together in small groups and you discuss this and you learn something, and then you see how different people are implementing these moves to different ends as well. Because some people may be headed towards maybe creative monogamy. Maybe they're going to keep a lot of things monogamous about their relationship, but they're going to be exploring and experimental in others. Other people may be intentionally designing a poly mono situation where one partner is more polyamorous, the other is still monogamous, and they want to get really clear on, okay,
There
how
was
do
the
we
word,
do that?
intentionally.
Intentional, right?
Yeah.
And just, a whole range of possibilities. But if you surround yourself with people who are walking this particular path in life, it helps to destigmatize, because you may be
Mhm.
feeling a lot of
Oh, yeah,
shame.
that's a good word for it. Yeah.
Yeah. If you feel shame, like if you're feeling like you're not enough, or if you're feeling a lot of blame and like your partner's done something bad to you because they have just shared this information, then I mean, that is just not a fun place to be. If that's where you are, then I would encourage you to make space in your life for people who are also questioning and contemplating, what else could love be? What else could sex be? What other relationship strategies might work? The other thing that comes up right away, I just said, sex. I think we have to be pretty cautious. A lot of people have decided that monogamous relationships are better, right? They're better, and one of the reasons why is they are more sexually safe. But the research actually doesn't bear that out, because we know that cheating is a thing, and because cheaters often don't people who are cheating often don't use sexual protection, and then they don't get STI tests because they don't want that stuff to show up on their records, and because then they don't disclose the information to other partners, their STI rates are actually worse than somebody who is intentionally, consensually building their non-monogamous relating. So, if you're feeling some sex negativity, or if you're feeling the sex negativity of just like long-term committed sex is good, any other sex is bad, okay.
Research doesn't pan out.
Well, and just, hey, so that's a way to think in the world, but it's only one way. Sex negative attitudes come from a lot of places. They come from our religious upbringing, they come from our schools. We have a laughable state of what I can only put great big air quotes around sex education in the United States. And so if you are carrying some sex negative attitudes, there are a million reasons why. Okay, so no blame, but time to unpack those. And a lot of
Right.
us imagine that we are sex positive until we're faced with somebody wanting to do sex differently than we do. And then all of a sudden, whoo, actually, I have a lot of judgments. I got a lot of baggage there. That's important to unpack. Um, on the other hand, it's important to also watch out for the poly is more evolved
Oh boy.
rhetoric.
Yeah. It's no. No,
Right.
it's not.
So let's not put any relationship style on a pedestal because they're relationship styles. They're not saviors. Um, and they're only going to be as ethical and as consensual as the people living them. And so, but there does tend to be this sort of, I don't know, moral posturing that happens amongst the polyamorous community. And
And that can well, it can get in the way of really pursuing your own intentional relationship design.
right,
Because if there's this idea that there's a like a right way to do any of it, well, it gets in the way. I think you know this because of the whole monogamy move to polyamory. It's like, oh no, there's a way you're supposed to do it, not poly. Oh, but now you're going to be poly. Well, there's a way to do that too.
right,
No, no,
right.
let's not play that game.
And if you're caught in that, probably what you're feeling is some level of insecurity about your relationship structure choices, especially if you're feeling a little insecurity. You're probably going to feel a little defensive and be
Right.
defending your relationship style as if it is correct. It's
And
totally fine to say it's correct for you,
yeah. And once
but
again, having a supportive community around you
yeah,
helps with that sense of insecurity.
where we can normalize the idea that we also might not even know what we really feel about a relationship style or structure.
Yeah.
You know, it's completely reasonable to be exploring and to not know whether it's for you yet. That's okay too. I think the the last thing I want to say is resourcing yourself with um tools for embodied safety while you're dealing with all of this. You know, we say it all the time, but figuring out what ways help you self-regulate, bring your body mind into like, okay, my body can be with my mind can be with my body, and I don't need to run out of this place. Um, we need those skills in order to navigate the change. So if you experienced getting polybombed, like that's how you experienced it. Probably what happened is you experienced becoming intensely dysregulated very, very, very quickly, and you didn't know what to do next. So if you can learn more tools to navigate the big information that's going to come into your life from time to time, awesome. But if you didn't have those tools, it's never too late to add them. I didn't I
That's true.
I feel
I
like,
mean, it was a game changer less than
well,
2 years ago when we started learning
to
this,
have a more
to
specific
having more
way. Yeah,
specific
up
tools.
until then, I think we've been hacking stuff
Yeah, we've
together.
been
We've been like
muddling along.
cobbling together
Yeah.
ways to self-regulate and co-regulate.
I mean, we all do. That's what a hug is. You know, there are things that we do,
Right.
but we can get more
We can get more
competent at it. There
competent
are more
and
tools,
move
more
past just what
techniques.
we intuitively
Right.
stumble upon.
Yep.
And if you have those tools in place, it'll go easier. But if you're struggling right now, then adding those somatic practices, the practices that allow you to simply slow down and let your process unfold a little bit without feeling like the threat is so overwhelming, it'll help. It'll help. I think we should wrap up this episode by just saying that, the experience of being polybombed or feeling polybombed, it's overwhelming. And I get that. And I hope that if you could walk away with one thing, it would be, what if you go back to your partner now and say, I'm scared. I'm scared. I don't understand. And I would like to try to be on this journey with you. And if you were the person who delivered the big information, what if you can approach your partner and say, I imagine that you're feeling scared. I imagine that you're feeling like this could take us down a road that you don't understand and you never asked for. And I wonder if you would just step out onto that road with me anyways. Would you be curious with me? It's not a small ask.
It's not a small ask.
But it is.
And it's the beginning of a conversation. And that's what we're doing.
That's what relating is.
That's what relating is.
Yeah. Okay. So I do recommend following up. I would follow this episode up with a couple of episodes. The episode on why am I not enough? And unfuck your mono mind, because there's a lot of challenging ideas to unpack, and maybe internalized polyphobia too. Yeah, a little bit of that one as well. If that one's not out yet, it's coming out soon.
It is.
I can't remember which order it is.
Yeah. So there's resources. There's us. There's a world of resources. There's people. There's the year of opening. Lots of places that you can get support.
And you're not alone.
No.
You're not alone. 20% of people in North America have tried non-monogamy at some point. 5% or more, because we underreport, we do, because it's a stigmatized experience, are practicing right now. You're not alone.
There's no one right way to design your relationship. And lots of people, actually about 25%, according to a recent national survey, are interested in some type of open relationship. But how do you know if you are ready to open up happily? Not everyone is, and that's no problem. I've got a 60-second quiz that will give you the answer. And even better, you'll walk away with your next step, whether you're good to go or not so much when it comes to opening up. And this is no BuzzFeed nonsense. I personally designed this quiz from my years of academic research. Go to joliquiz.com. That's JOLIQUIZ.com, and find out if you're ready to open up happily and what to do if you are or if you're not.